We're in Perek Yud Chet, and we are up to the middle of the negotiation between Avraham Avinu and HaKadosh Baruch Hu regarding Sdom. The question could fairly be asked. In fact, I asked it last week. Was this all for naught? In the end, Avraham Avinu's prayer, asking, begging, cajoling, negotiating, bargaining, it didn't work. Sdom gets destroyed. That's the end of the story. So what happened with this tefillah? What's it about? So the Dubno Magid has a very nice mashal. He was given to allegories. He said basically there were two business people who were traveling, and they get to a fair. One of them is younger and one of them is older. So they come to a fair and they find clothing. And the older a person decides that he wants to buy some clothing, but he's concerned that he will not be able to give it to his child, that it won't fit his child. And then he went through all the effort to buy it, and he brought it, and it didn't go anywhere. The young man said to him, "I'm going to buy because I'm younger. I have younger children, and if one of my kids doesn't fit into the clothing, so another kid will fit into the clothing, and if not that kid, then another kid." The idea, it's an allegory, but the point of the Dubno Magid is everything that Hashem tells us in the Torah about Avraham Avinu, or to say it differently, everything Avraham Avinu does is all kept for future generations. Nothing is for naught. And the idea that Hashem tells Avraham Avinu about Sdom, even though God has perfect foreknowledge, therefore knows that it's not going to be successful. That's another paradox we're not really ever going to be able to unpack as it is as human beings. But the idea that he wanted to say to Avraham Avinu, my invitation to you is to daven for them, even if really it's not going to work out for them. That the tefillahs themselves will be kept for the future, and that they will have an impact in the future. And that's the idea. The preamble is V'Avram hayoyeh legoy gadol. The Jewish people will emanate from Avraham Avinu, will be a great nation. And the point here is, if these tefillot are not going to work for Avraham, for the people of Sdom, rather, when Avraham Avinu utters them, then future generations will benefit. They'll find a way for them to be beneficial. I have no direct line to know this definitively, but it does remind us of a later story in Tanakh where against all odds, an individual chose to engage in intercessory prayer, to pray for people who were guilty, and to be very persistent in that campaign. And he was successful. And perhaps his inspiration came from his great-great-great-great-grandfather, Avraham Avinu. Perhaps. Yeah. So Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayichal Moshe et pnei Hashem Elokav, Vayomer, etc. It could be that it is somehow the inspiration from Avraham Avinu that goes from one generation to the next. We don't know, definitively, but could be. This is a question that really I do think about fairly often. And previous years, particularly in Yom Noraim, I've tried to consider it and turn it over in my mind in terms of the idea that not every tefillah is necessarily going to be answered in the way that we would like and the time that we would like it, but that it does lay down certain pathways, even if they're not going to be felt lidore dorot, that they matter. Avraham Avinu here shows us also not to give up, even though he went to 50 and then he pushed it farther. And that's really why we refer to it very often as bargaining with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I pointed out last time, Rashi already tells us 50 to 45, because 9 for each city would mean that there's at least the possibility, if you will, that Hashem is the standard. He's called Sadiko Shel Olam, that Hashem is the standard to complete the number 10. And that you need 10, the model, as we saw from the end of the negotiation here, where Rashi notes that in the days of Noach and his 3 sons, all of whom are married, do not have a quorum of 10, and they don't even have 9. And therefore, the world does not remain in place, and it's washed over. And that's what happens in Sdom as well. And it might have actually gotten to that number. We'll see. We already looked at it before. When we get into Sdom, we'll see it inside. I wanted to spend a couple of minutes just describing what happens between 50 and 45. Avraham seems to have more of a self-deprecating approach in verse 27 than he did in verses 24 and 25, 23, 24, 25. Right? Initially, Avraham, look at verse 23. Vayigash Avraham vayomar ha'afti spet tzadikim rasha. Are you going to put the tzadikim with the rashaim? You're going to put them all, in the same basket. You'll sweep them up together. Ulai yesh 50 tzadikim b'toch ha'ir. Ha'afti spet v'lo tisal ha'makom l'man 50 tzadikim asher b'kirba. Are you going to really just not give them a reprieve, not forgive them on account of the fact that there are 50 tzaddikim? Is that not enough to save them? Chalil lecha, it's not, chulin hula, says the Gemara. Rashi quotes, it's profane for you to do such a thing, Hashem, to put to death the tzaddik with the rasha. You're bunching them together. Repeats again, Chalil lecha shofei kol aretz lo yaseh mishpat. Your reputation is on the line, if you will. And it shouldn't be done. Hashem gives him a positive or affirmative answer. Vayomer Hashem im emtzav. If I find that number, so the 50 tzaddikim in the city, I will give to the whole place. I'll give them all off, just for that. Vayan Avraham vayomar hinei na ho'alti ledaber el Adonai ve'anochi afar ve'efer. So he already spoke before. So why is this sort of reopening a dialogue? And the self-deprecating part, I'm dust and ashes. I'm so low. I'm nothing. I'm nothing of nothing. Ulai maybe yachzerun 50 tzadikim 5 hatashchit ba5 et kol ha'ir. Vayomer lo ashchit im tzasham 45. So let me throw it out there. Why do you suspect Avinu had to be more self-deprecating now than in the initial salvo of his tefillah? Go ahead, please.
Could he be? Yeah, I'm trying to imagine myself arguing with my parents when I was young, and you ask one thing and you're granted it, and then you kind of have to humbly, if you want something more, go back a second time. So I would think this is a him doing the same thing. Hashem's the ultimate father, and he is acting with great humility, going back again for a second request.
A second helping.
Yeah.
Excellent. I mean, that would on the level of pshat seem to explain it, right? He's coming that way. But let me ask it differently. I mean, I agree with you 100%, but doesn't that also leave us with a bit of a question? Why didn't Avram just do that initially when he first started talking to Hashem? God said, this is what I'm going to do. I just don't want to hide it from you because you're Avram Avinu, so I'm just going to tell you. And Avram says, what? No, how could you do that? How could that be? Right? In other words, absent any of the introductory phases or elements of Anochi Afar Va'efer, I already started, we already have something going on. None of that is, right? I feel like the cat wants to contribute, Karen. It's right there on the screen. But
He loves your voice, Rabbi.
I see that. Glad to have a mellifluous voice that
I would say that this is still the same thing. You ask for something smaller, namely the 50 people, and then you just keep tightening it. It's still the same kind of thing that a child would do with a parent. It's like, can I go outside and play? Can I play until it gets dark out? Can I play a block away? You kind of build.
It's the opposite. It's the opposite of what you're saying. It's the opposite. Can I have 20 people? If there's 20 people, I get the 20. Can I have 25?
Yeah.
Can I go play? Can I play with
great. That's
And it's
great,
going to be
Shoshi.
the opposite.
It's going up. Yeah.
I
yeah.
think God knows, I think Abraham knows that there aren't 50 people there. This is Shelley.
Hi, Shelley, good morning.
And I think he's starting out with his strongest premises, which is, shouldn't the God of the world do tzedek? And then he's saying, okay, well, I know, okay, I know there aren't, he's not really saying, I know there aren't 50, but he knows from the beginning. And that's why he goes down in the increments, because he wants to save whatever few righteous people there are, because he's all chesed. So he starts with his strongest argument, and then he decides, I am humble. I am arguing with God. I shouldn't be doing this, but this is really important.
So
Debbie, go ahead, please. First,
for
Debbie,
me, and I used to struggle with the question when I was your age, but now it's, in my brain solidly. It just ties, it's from the beginning that this is not a history book, even going all the way back to Abraham. It's modeling behaviors that we, Abraham's children, need to execute in our own life. So what Abraham is doing with Hashem here, even though it involves obviously his time in history and Dam, is easily transferable if you believe in the premise that this is what it is, a guide for how we need to live our lives. That's why I'm always so focused, whatever we're learning in whatever class, to, okay, I get this, but how can I transfer this to the life I live every day?
Yeah. Beautiful. So I want to share with you something that may sound a little bit controversial, but I didn't make it up. It's Rabbeinu Ephraim, one of the Balei Tosfot. I don't have it as a primary source. I have it in one of the anthologies that I like to use. He says the following: Avram Avinu, when he heard the news that God is going to destroy 5 cities, he forgot himself. His gut reaction was, what? This is inconceivable. You're the God, right? You're the God of justice. How could you do this? How could you do this? It's impossible. Chalil lecha. And then, Rabbeinu Ephraim says, I remind you, this is one of the Balei Tosfot. He says that you see the humility of Hashem. Hashem didn't say to him, you know that I'm not going to be doing this unless they deserve it. And he didn't say to him, what you just spoke, how you just spoke to me, using the parent analogy, by the way, to Karen's point and Shoshi's point. He didn't say to him, I'm your father in heaven. You don't talk to me this way. Rather, he just said, if I find 50, I will give the whole place a pass. But because of the fact that this dialogue, this interchange happened, Rabbeinu Ephraim reads the next words, Vayan Avraham, verse 27, Vayan Avraham vayomar, hinena ho'alti ledaber el Hashem, not as I have begun, but rather I have acted foolishly to speak to God in this way, for I am truly dust and ashes.
Rabbi?
Wait, Shelley, one second. And one second. If you want an analogy to this, when the angels come to tell Sarah Imenu she's going to have a baby, she laughs. And there's like that dialogue that, frankly, I've never fully been able to understand. That she said, no, I didn't laugh. I was afraid. And then Vayomer lo kitzachak, you laughed. But the point is, it's the natural, visceral reaction. And the Torah preserves, at least according to this view of Rabbeinu Ephraim, the visceral reaction of the Baal Chesed par excellence, Avram Avinu. What? you're going to do this? This is a total injustice. I can't. But then Avram Avinu caught himself and said, okay, I really shouldn't have done this. I'm backtracking and I'm relenting, and therefore I'm going to be much more attentive in my language. And therefore, to the end of the story, we do not have again him saying, but you're the judge and you're not going to do justice? Question mark, exclamation point. None of that. That's all gone. But the point is the initial thrust adds to the drama as people reading it, but that's because that's actually how Avram Avinu reacted. And that's the greatness of Avram Avinu. His visceral reaction is torn to pieces. How could this be? 5 cities you're going to destroy? Oh, but wait a minute. I'm talking to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, my Father in heaven. I'm a lot more reticent in my approach. Shelley, you were waiting patiently. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hold you at bay there, but I wanted to finish the sentence. It's a long sentence.
I can't help but thinking about the Job story, though. What God replies at the end to Job, which is basically, how dare you talk to me like this? You weren't there when I created the world. So what is the difference? Why does God respond one way one time and another way another time? Because he puts Job
you're right.
so much more.
You're right. A course in and of itself to try to understand how you just gave the punchline of Job. Spoiler alert for those who have never read it. That's pretty much what that's happening at the end of the book, is God telling Eov, well, where were you when I made the world? What do you understand about how I run the world? You expect you're going to understand this? There's nothing to understand here. You're not going to get it. So, there's no point in you persisting in these complaints and the like. We can't go there. It's too big. But you could find an easier example at the end of Parshat Shmot, where Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the author, I remind you, of the book of Job, a book of Eov, he wrote it, according to the Gemara, he's the author. At the end of Parshat Shmot, he actually asks Hashem very pointedly, why did you make it worse for this nation? You've not saved them. And what does Hashem tell him? Wait. Looks like that now, but wait, there's a process that's unfolding. Don't whatever it is, don't lose hope. Don't despair, etc. So, I mean, for whatever that's worth, it's the question might be a little bit better than the answer, though, in as much as here Hashem doesn't say any of those things back to Avram Avinu. In fact, the way we traditionally understand this is that God is actually almost inviting Avram Avinu to complain. Yeah? Isn't he?
Right. I mean, it's almost like an aside in a play when God says, should I hide this news from Abraham?
Yeah. Right. Shall I hide? Right. We talked about that, right? The, so to speak, lahavdil, the soliloquy of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, right? He steps lahavdil fe'avdal, but you hear the voice from offstage. Shall I hide it from Abraham? Well, I better tell him about the story, right? But according to the Rabbeinu Ephraim, it's like based on the pasuk from Sefer Bamidbar, after the unfortunate episode of Miriam Hanaviyah having conversation with her brother Aaron HaKohen, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu steps in. Vayomer Aaron El Moshe Bi Adoni Al Na Tashet Alinu Chatat Asher Noalnu V'Asher Chatanu. Please don't accord this against us as a sin for our having acted foolishly and for our having sinned. Right. So the point is Asher Noalnu Hina Hoalti. I should not have spoken with such irreverence, though I did. So now I'm asking much more tentatively, for something else. And that's where the bargaining comes up. Right? So now let's say there are only 5 tzaddikim. Why did he say 5 tzaddikim? Again, because 9 in each city. We get that. What happens when you jump down from 45 to 40? What's the calculus there? Rashi thinks it means that it's going to be 4 cities will be saved in total. Right? It's a little bit of a question. How do you know the division of the number of tzaddikim between the 5 cities, that it's going to be per city? Meaning, what if there are 40 tzaddikim that are spread around the 5 cities, but it's not 10, per se. So that's a bit of a question, right? You have 8 times 5. So there's sort of a question there. Now, at the beginning, God could have just said to Avram Avinu, look, there aren't even 10 tzaddikim in any of these places. It would have made for a much shorter parak, no? Like, what would have happened if Hashem said to Avram, I looked, I checked into it, there's not even 10. End of story, no? QED. But the Ramban says that God didn't want to tell him this because the trial was going on right now. This was the trial of Sodom. It's happening right now. Like, the court is in session. Now, how do you know the court is in session? Dial back. I know we flip pages a lot here, but you need to see this in order to realize what's going on. Look at verse 22, Pasuk 22, and you'll understand. I hope you'll understand, unless I fail abysmally, in which case you won't understand. Vayifnu misham ha'anashim, vayilchu Sodoma, ve'Avraham odenu omed lifnei Hashem. What does that mean? Avraham is still standing in front of God. So some of the Mefarshim point out, the Ramban is one of them, that there are 2 things going on at the same time chronologically in 2 different places. But as you know, the limitation of a sefer, any book, any sefer, how are you going to show 2 concurrent things? If this was Lahavdil Fe'avdol, a movie, Lahavdil, or a Zoom, you'd have one screen, Avram's talking to Hashem. But the other screen would be 2 angels arriving in Sodom, going to the house of Lot, and the townspeople converging on the house and saying, give us those 2. And Lot's saying, no, but I'll give you my daughters. We're going to read that in depth when we get there, right? And those 2 things are not happening sequentially. It's not, there was a case, and Avram said 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. It didn't go that way. No. It went, Avram standing in front of Hashem, the 2 malachim out of the 3 go down to Sodom. The third one, as we'll see, went went back to Shemayim, if you will, evaporated, it wasn't needed. It's not one, then 2. It's 2 tracks. They're happening concurrently. While Avram's saying the words to Hashem, Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat, you know what's happening exactly that time? Hold your finger at 22. I know I'm like skipping ahead, but I want you to see it so you get the chapter 19, verse 1. Vayavo shnei malachim Sodom ba'erev, v'lot yoshev b'shar Sodom, vayar Lot v'yakum likratam vayishtachu apayim arza. The 2 angels are arriving in Sodom, and Lot is sitting where? He's sitting at the gate. You know what Lot's job is? Rashi, quoting from the Medrash Rabbah, Rashi there writes, Yoshev, he's sitting there. Why? Because that day they made him the magistrate. He's the chief justice of Sodom. While Avram's saying to God, will the judge of all the earth not mete out justice? Judge Lot is sitting in his new perch at the gate of the town, welcoming his 2 guests and welcoming them to his house. And they're saying, we're going to sleep in the street. And he's saying, that's not going to be a good idea because they got some crazy things that they do here to people that are absolutely dastardly. So he takes them into the house. These 2 things are happening at exactly the same time. So we got 2 hands playing on a piano, and it's the same time. Now, when you go back to our part and you see that Avram is negotiating 50, 45, 40, 30, 20, right? It's as the judgment of Sodom is unfolding. You follow? And therefore, God doesn't open with, there's not 10 tzaddikim, it's over, case closed. I just want to let you know, but rather 50. Says the Ramban, because it hasn't been decided yet. Because it's still possible to salvage it. And so much of it will hinge on Avram's tefillah, but so much of it will hinge on what Lot's going to do or not do.
Well, doesn't Lot do the right thing? I mean, at least initially. He doesn't call in the other guys, the other heads of Sodom and say, oh, look here, we got to get this guy out of here. These 2 men.
Sure.
He welcomes them.
Yes. And at exactly that moment, I imagine God saying to Avram Avinu, if I find 50 tzaddikim, it'll be okay. Huh?
Why would Hashem send a malach if he didn't have a job already that he was going to have to do? What's the last job going to be if he's not? He's there to say Stum's going. So it's as if it's a done deal already.
Right. And now we learn, and that's what I would have concluded as well. But obviously, the very fact that there was still some, according to the Ramban at least, again, you could say not that way. You could say, as you're saying it, and that's obviously an argument in favor of, no, these are sequential stories. First came the negotiation. Since it failed, next pasuk, the executioner and the rescuer showed up. The executioner to destroy the 5 cities and the rescuer to take Lot and his family. Yeah, agreed. But that's not how it went down. Now, let me show you. I have only a few minutes left. I hope we get through this. I'm going to try to say it as succinctly as possible. And I know full well that I'm like skipping around, but we are anchored now in our negotiations. But I want to show you what it means if the two stories were running concurrently. It's based in a Torah, I believe, from Rav Yaakov Meidan of Shiva Shvat Har Etzion. But it goes like this: as the negotiation is going on, if they are concurrent stories, then God is saying, well, 50, okay, get to the house, etc. But Avram stops at 10, and he just stops arguing. Like, okay, that's it. If you find 10, God doesn't say to him at the 10. If you flip ahead, verse 31. Again, I'm sorry. I know I'm speaking. I'm continuing to speak in this way. By the way, Rashi thinks the word ho'alti and I'm speaking means vayoel, like vayoel Moshe means I want this, or I desire this. I'm trying this. Again, so there's or I started this process already, so I'm going to continue. So vayomer al na yichar ladonai v'adabra achapam ulai matzu sham asara vayomer lo ashri pavur asara. God says to them, for 10, I won't destroy for 10. Okay, so now, wouldn't your next question to Hashem be, so are there 10? Avram doesn't say anything. The next thing is vayelech Hashem kasher kila daber el Avraham v'Avraham shav limkomo. Done, finished, right? So the Rashi here quotes from the Medrash, since the defense attorney was quiet, so the Dayan all said, okay, case closed. We agreed, 10, and that's the end of it. Why didn't Avram go less? So we already saw perhaps the idea that he understood the number 10 was this symmetrical, important number from a Jewish perspective, a universal, cosmic perspective, but from the perspective of the Torah's understanding of the world, base 10, 10 tzaddikim, that story with Noach, it didn't get there. Now watch what happens when you're looking at when it's already clear that the place is going down, the last ditch effort, assuming again that these stories are in some way concurrent. Look at chapter 19, verse 12. Pasuk Yud Bet, Perak Yud Tet, Pasuk Yud Bet. Vayomru ha'anashim Lot, Malachim talking to Lot. Od milachafo, Chatan uvanecha uvanotecha v'chol asher lecha ba'ir hotzei min hamakom. So what does he say here? It's you have your people who are with you, yeah, your family. You're gonna get they're all gonna get out of here. Why? Kimashritim anachnu et hamakom hazeh ki gadla tzakatam at pnei Hashem v'yishachenu Hashem l'shachata. So we're destroying this place because the screams have been great, before God, and He sent us to destroy it. Vayetze Lot. Vaidaber el Chotanav. Chotanav, what's Chotanav? Yeah, his sons-in-law. So he's talking to his sons-in-law. That seems fairly apparent. That's Chotanav. Lokhe benotav, they're each married to one of his daughters. Vayomer kumu tseu min hamakom hazeh ki mashchit Hashem et ha'ir vayehi ki mitzachek b'einei Chotanav. But his sons-in-law, they're laughing. They make fun of him. I think it's not true. It's too far-fetched. They don't accept. So you have Lot and his wife, and he has 2 daughters who are married to 2 sons, and then he's got his 2 single daughters. We know about them because they show up later. You counting with me? And then there's 2 angels in the house. We've arrived. But here's what happened, tragically. The 2 sons-in-law thought it was a big joke, and they told their wives, we're staying home. And that's how it fell apart. Avram Avinu reasoned, I know how many people are in the family. 2 malachim are going to show up. So, okay, let's say hypothetically, we're not going to get to the actual number. There's 8 of them, but there's two malachim. Great. Except if the 2 sons-in-law are laughing. And that was it. And there you keep reading, and then if you keep reading the next verse, as the sun is about to come up, it's daybreak. Kum kach et ishtecha vet shnei v'notecha nimtzaot penti safeh ba'avon ha'ir. The only people who are going to be leaving is you're going to take your wife and your 2 daughters, and the 4 of you are going to go. And that's who left, which ended up being 3 because of what happens to Eshet Lot. And Avram Avinu is telling Hashem, okay, so let's get to 10. Maybe 10 would be okay. Yeah.
Why are the 2 angels, why are they counted in their 10?
Hopeful. They're 2. They're in the city. They're adding to the character of the city. Hopeful. Again, maybe. I mean, it's just the fact that these 2 sons-in-law were like, this is a joke. This is just a joke. So then he tells them, okay, take your 2 daughters and finished. Now, not everyone agrees with this approach, obviously. Again, you could see it totally not this way. You could see this as 2 sequential stories. It does beg the question, why did Avram stop at 10? Because if he's thinking about Lot and his family, is that really going to be enough? Right? Question came in, why would Hashem send a malach and then not have him do his job? Why would God send a malach and not have him do his job? God constantly sends malachim who don't have doing their job because we intervene. We daven. The malach gets canceled. Whatever the malach is sent to do doesn't necessarily mean they have to fulfill their job. Sometimes they get stopped. The malach hamavet sometimes gets stopped. During the story of, a good example, during the story of Korach, it's very vivid there in the Medrash, describing the malach hamavet is standing, preparing to slaughter yet more people, and Aaron HaKohen standing with his fire pan says, stop, at the time of a plague. Right? Stop. You can't go any further. So now why would God send an angel who he then wants to have stopped? That depends on us, on our actions, on our tefillot, what we're going to do. Sometimes it gets overridden by Hashem. Sometimes we can stop it. It seems that that's what's going on, yeah? So even though the malach has already been dispatched, the hope is not gone. People think the malach hamavet is bearing down on them, but okay, there's still hope. As Chizkiyahu HaMelech would say later on to Yeshaya HaNavi when he was on his deathbed, from which he recovered, he said, they learned from his great-great-great-grandfather, from David HaMelech, Afilu cherev chadam unachal at tzavaro shel adam al yamano atzmo minat tefillah. Even if there's a sharp sword on a person's neck, they still shouldn't stop praying because you never know. You can still ask. No guarantees, not a machine, but there's something here. Yeah, and there still was sort of hope, but the fate was sealed because the people showed up at the door and were trying to, beat down the door, etc. It wasn't going well. Yeah. So this theory is that in fact there were somehow 10, but that the 10 didn't last because of the scoffers. You see the power of cynicism to lay low, to destroy what could be salvation itself. So it's interesting. So those are just some thoughts to think about. And if you think about it that way, it explains why we have to hear all the phases, because Avram is still hopeful that he can, even if you lower the bar, there's still a way to do it. But he's not going to repeat the process below 10. And we say this over and over on Yom Kippur in terms of the 13 attributes of mercy. And yeah, this is the idea that, right, that the judgment can be overturned. The malach's job is just single-minded, one task, and that's what they do, right? So, okay, but sometimes the Kadosh Baruch Hu intervene and say, stop, I change your path. Rosalie, go ahead.
No, when Abraham went from 50 to 45 people, he was counting Hashem to be from the 9 to 10. He included Hashem.
That's
with
what
each
Rashi
one.
says, yeah.
No, so I'm saying, so I could understand if he's going to do that way with Hashem, why can't he do that with the Malachim?
Yeah. Chinami, right? Chinami. That once we could do it at once with Hashem. So, okay, so two malachim, not as good, but okay, but still something. They're still beings. They're still creatures of Hashem, creations of Hashem, and they're in the room. So maybe their presence would be enough. Maybe. In the end, of course, it doesn't go that way, but it's an attempt.
Rabbi?
Go ahead, please. Hi, Helen. Good morning.
Good morning. In the story of the Akedah, we have the opposite, that Hashem is telling Abraham to do something, and the last minute, the Malach comes in and tells him, don't do it. So it's a variation on that particular theme.
Fine. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. There's an interplay between the two. Sometimes the one overrides, sometimes the other overrides. By the way, the Malach told Avram not to do it, but Avram still had the free will to disobey the Malach, right? That's
right.
As I'll say that Avram Avinu said to the Malach, "Can I just give him a nick?" Like, so I could say, like I was Yotze, like I started the cut. What does it say? Al tishlach yad chalanar val taslo me'uma. Why does the Malach repeat? Don't send your hand against the boy, against the lad, and don't do anything to him. Means not even a nick.
Wow.
Yeah, powerful, right?
Thank you.
By the way, I think it was the Kotzker Rebbe who said that was the biggest test, was not sacrificing Yitzchak, but not sacrificing Yitzchak.
Right. Yeah, you mentioned
once
it before that he felt very sad.
This is what I got to do. I'm a servant of God. This is the mitzvah. This is the mitzvah. The mitzvah. To hear in a spin of a dime, it's not the mitzvah, and now it's an avera. What do you mean? And the idea that you have to hold back is the nisayon of the Akedah, paradoxically. Again, you can see it different ways. That's the Kotzker. Always had this sort of this piercing way of seeing things, very counterintuitive in many respects.
Rabbi,
yeah,
why doesn't Abraham specifically ask God to save Lot and his family? He does not. He stops at the 10, and that's it. So he doesn't know that God is, sent, that these malachim are going to save Lot. Why isn't you're supposed to pray for your own family as well as pray for the, universal.
Right. So I talked about this, I remember last week, we were talking about the idea that the war, 4 kings, 5 kings, is beginning with Avram's involvement. It begins with his desire to save Lot, but it expands outward to include a salvation of all the people. And now, Stom, it's the other way. I want to save Lot as part of wanting to save more than just Lot, but saving all the people. In other words, it's part of the progression of this is the greatness of an Avram Avinu. It's not that he didn't want to save Lot. It's that he didn't get up in front of a Kodesh Baruch and say, just save my family. To the end, when he's saying about the 10 tzaddikim, are you willing to forego killing all the people for the sake of those 10? Answer, yes, I'm willing to forego. In other words, the greatest of Avram, it comes to its zenith here, not because he was ignoring Lot, but dafka because he saw Lot as possibly the catalyst for saving all the people. And by the by, for a disappointed uncle - adoptive father to say such a thing about Lot, like maybe he's having an influence, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Maybe because of him and his family, just his own household, maybe they can save everybody. Maybe? Okay, fine. Yes, agreed. Yeah, but after that, it went down. Yeah, it didn't work. This didn't work. And we see that it didn't work. The place got destroyed. The five cities got destroyed. Yeah.
I still think even at the end, he specifically, if he should have asked for Lot. Because what if God hadn't saved Lot? How would he have felt at that point? He begs for Ishmael to work to live before God. So it just seems to me, okay, he's on this high chesed thing. He's universal. He thinks that Lot could maybe save, could
I hear you.
maybe influence these people. But if God is not going to save the 10, shouldn't he at least have said, okay, well, if it really is that bad,
maybe.
Please,
Shelley
at least
doesn't
say, look,
argue
I
for
can't believe he
Yitzhak.
said that.
Yeah.
He doesn't argue for Yitzhak. You're surprised he's not arguing for
Well, we're going to
Lot?
get to the Yitzhak. We don't have to. That's a question on
We
the
haven't even
Akedah.
gotten there.
That's question on the Akedah. But staying here to Shelley's point, I hear you, but don't you think that we would have certain people on this call without mentioning names saying, look at that. He asked for Lot. It was all about saving his nephew. That was the whole reason he did this, was just to save his own, his own kin. He could care less about the other people. He thought they were wicked and they should die. Wouldn't we be saying that? Like, why is he talking about Lot? He was talking about Lot, but instead of saying it's Lot, save Lot, who cares about everybody else? He had already shown in the War of the Four Kings, Five Kings, he loved Lot, wanted to save Lot, but he said there's an expansive thing I can do here and help all the people. And the converse was true too. By the way, totally historically anachronistic, but it does make me wonder sometimes. Is this how the Joint Distribution Committee came up with its strategy? But this was its strategy for many decades, was we're not just coming to save the Jews, we're coming to help all the people, and among them, all the Jews. But it's a different way of approaching things. The focus is we're saving our own, but in doing so, we're also saving everybody, and therefore we're embracing everybody. We're lifting up the world, and we're a part of the world, not apart from the world, but a part of the world. Lot is part of Stone. Maybe he can save Stone. Now, by the by, in the end, Lot does get saved, and the Torah will pretty much say he's getting saved pretty much in the merit of his uncle Avraham, not in his own merit. But that's not, we didn't get there yet, so that's a spoiler. Anyway, 10:01, I don't want to keep you longer. Please, you're welcome to join me on Thursday at 9:30, a Chanukah Shir, 8 days of Thanksgiving. We'll learn more about Birkat HaMazon, Al Hanisim, some other points to ponder. Please join me 9:30 on Thursday morning. Have a great week, everybody, and Yasher Koach.